Greetings from paradise. Welcome to the Enjoy the Journey Luxury Travel Show, live from the beautiful Florida Keys. A special welcome to our live streaming viewers and podcast listeners around the world. I'm your host, David Hartman, owner of Fantastic Endeavors Travel Agency. I'm the travel agent that always asks two questions. What is your bucket list trip? And where do you wish you were right now? I wish you were here with me in the Florida Keys. It's an amazing day here. A beautiful winter March day in the Florida Keys. Little cold front down to about mid-60s, a little sunny, a little blue sky. And we're surviving here in the Keys and hope you're surviving where you are too. We are live from my home studio in Key Largo, Florida. Today is all about cruising. What will cruising look like when we cruise again, and when can we cruise again? My special guest today is Eric Bowman, executive editor of TravelPulse, and host of TravelPulse podcast, who will join us after our brief sponsor break. But first, as always, please like this feed today wherever you're watching it, and please share it and tell people that Dave is live today, and watch our social media. And I got some slides to show you guys real quick, because it's important. This is a social media based show, and it's important that we get support from you guys. And follow my YouTube channel, which we're growing, Fantastic Endeavors, where we're live right now. And all my shows are found there on the Enjoy the Journey playlist. So check that out and sit back and enjoy all of our past shows. As we started almost a year ago, our year anniversary is coming up. This is actually episode 51. So next week will be 52, but the year anniversary is coming up. We'll be here in 2 weeks, so check that out. So our show is brought to you by Fantastic Endeavors Travel Agency, of which I'm an owner. I am joined now by Skip Shear and Sue Mooney, people who really enjoy working with me and what we do. And if anything you ever need, please check out our tag there. I'm just showing you our contact information right now, as you can see right here up above. I'm also brought to you by a great sponsor called Atlas Ocean Voyages. They are Luxe-Expeditions, an amazing cruise line. They are launching in July of this year doing Mediterranean. Then they're heading over to South America and then on down south. And I'll be on board for the November 28th to December 10th Antarctica cruise, but a very special cruise. We're going to go to a solar eclipse after we see Antarctica. Come on, talk about a bucket list ship. So please join me on that cruise. So we're going to show you a quick ad from Atlas Ocean Voyages. After that, we're going to go right to Eric Bowman, executive editor of TravelPulse. We're going to talk about cruising. Yes, we're cruising soon, but what's it going to look like? And this guy is a guru of travel news. So check out what he has to say. We will be right back. Atlas Ocean Voyages offers smaller ships designed for luxe expeditions that extend the reach of adventure travel by sea, with their first ship launching in July 2021. Venture to small villages and remote locations, from the desert city of Petra to the frozen tundra of Antarctica. To experience Atlas Ocean Voyages, call David Hartman, 305-453-9208, Dave at bucketwishtrip.com. Welcome back to the Enjoy the Journey Luxury Travel Show. We have with us my guest today, Eric Bowman, executive editor of TravelPulse and the host of TravelPulse podcast. He's here to talk about a cruise industry update. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited you're here too. So I follow your podcast, and which I want you to tell everyone about, my audience. And you actually asked for guests, and I said, hey, I'll be a guest. And hey, want to come on my show?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad to be here, and we'll get you penciled in for the TravelPulse podcast. The way my show runs is it's a weekly show. Every Tuesday afternoon is when it drops, and I talk about what's been trending in the last week of travel, and then I bring on industry guests from travel agents and advisors to travel suppliers to regular people. So yeah, it's an exciting show. We talk about what's trending in the world of travel, and from everything from hard news and cruise news, obviously, different themes of the week, unique stuff like travel shaming, different topics that will excite and engage with the various people that listen, from travel advisors, regular travelers, traveler suppliers as well. So we have a lot of fun.
Exactly. I mean, I really enjoy the podcast, but obviously I first knew about TravelPulse being a travel agency. and following your amazing news updates. You guys are on top of everything. Now, is that a channel or a news channel just for advisors?
Yeah, so that's our core audience is travel agents and advisors at TravelPulse.com. But we consider ourselves a travel news website covering the travel industry at large. And there are regular consumers who come to our site. They find us via Google search, checking out the latest news updates, whether that's on cruising or hotels, or obviously right now in the world that we're living in is COVID-19 protocols and travel restrictions. Is we're seeing a lot of engagement around that, a lot of growth too on the website traffic, which is good because a lot of people want to know where can they go right now? What can I do? What can I not do? Where can I not go? And all sorts of things like that. So a lot of interest in travel right now. We've been talking about it for a while. You know it. I know it's the pent up demand in travel.
Sure.
There's a lot of it, and it's only going to continue to build. And good things are on the horizon. So it's tough right now. It's been tough, but things will get better. So yeah, at Travel Pulse, we're kind of staying on top of that and providing all the news and insights that travelers, travel advisors, that anyone who loves travel can jump on. So if it's trending in the world of travel, we're going to cover it.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate your team being a resource for me and my clients because I've always read the trade, but even more so since the whole COVID epidemic started, because it's changing every minute to every day. And one industry changing the most is what we're going to talk about next, because this show is about cruise travel. I've done a cruise travel industry update. I knew you have in your show, which is very helpful to me. And I covered it end of last year. This is more of, we're now pretty sure they're going to start soon. And what's it going to look like when the cruise lines start? So that's why I have you here, the expert, because you talk to the suppliers more than I do, at least the people that will tell you what's going on. My sales reps don't tell me what's going on. And I want to hear from you. So I have some questions for you, but tell me off the bat, as of right now, what is cruising going to look like when it starts, and when will the first cruises leave?
So right now what we're looking at for cruising is really nothing until June. All the major cruise lines have canceled through the end of May. Well, except Royal Caribbean hasn't announced yet, but they're the only one out of U.S. ports. So I do expect them to follow suit. That's the way the thing has been the entire last year, is that when one big cruise line announces cancellations, the other ones all follow suit. So right now we're looking at cancels through the end of May, unfortunately. So hopefully June is when they'll kickstart on that. I know Port Canaveral people, they issued a few months ago issued that they think their worst case scenario is that cruising wouldn't resume until July. So we're looking at June and July pretty much for when cruising will finally get going. So what they're waiting on right now is got more guidance from the CDC. They've kind of been at the mercy of the CDC and what they can and can't do. And so they need those test voyages to get going. So hopefully we can get some news coming up soon on when those test voyages will launch, and then they'll be able to kind of learn and grow from that, and then be able to adapt and put that towards actual passenger sailings coming up this summer.
Excellent summary to start. And you actually made me think of a few additional questions. First off, my own curiosity and some other clients I have, why is the CDC regulating cruising? I thought the Coast Guard regulated cruising. Somehow the CDC is directly controlling really their futures.
Yeah, I think it's based upon, they're leaning on the science side of things, and they're trusting in that. That's from my understanding, from what I've talked to. We've interviewed doctors at the CDC as well, and they have their recommendations on travel in general, and then they didn't really dive too much. I asked more about cruising and tried to get more insight there, but they didn't really give much on that, unfortunately. But that's kind of where it's at right now. I think that they're just focused on the science side of things and leaning
Sure.
on that, because the cruise industry really, to me, it was a bit of unfair treatment towards them over the last year, and a lot of people blamed them solely for the pandemic, but that's not the case. So there were rough incidences. Don't get me wrong. Now there was, things that were not handled very well in the early onset there. But since then, I think you've seen planes and you've seen hotels get going with all their new protocols. Like, I really thought the cruise industry would have their chance to put their new protocols in place that they spent months and months working on. They created all these different programs and different advisory boards together with scientists and stuff to be able to put that stuff into practice, but they're still just kind of waiting on when they can get that clearance from the CDC to move forward.
Exactly. And I think you called it. a few events mishandled over a year ago that were not handled well by countries, by ports, by a lot of different people. And the whole industry is now feeling the brunt of the blame. And not just in the US, but now the UK, I heard yesterday on a Princess webinar with John Chernesky, the VP of sales. They're coming down pretty hard with regulations for the cruise industry that are pretty stringent. And they just canceled all of summer for Princess even. And those cruises have nothing to do with the CDC. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. But really, Eric, that's a topic of a different show to
yeah, I'm not a scientist.
How poorly the cruise industry has been treated. But it is a shame. I will compare. Flights are flying full. I've been on them. Full of people, side by side, elbows to elbows, really with not much guidance or restrictions by the CDC, but cruises can't even begin to do a cruise to nowhere for 2 days as of today, but that is changing. But our topic today is more optimistic. We are talking about when cruises will start. I will say it was pretty neutral, kind of like what you said from cruise industry officials for a while, but now they're really getting excited. And first question is, what do you think about vaccines? What do you think about COVID tests? Because I know Royal Caribbean mentioned an Israeli cruise because they're like the best in the world at getting vaccines out, that 100% of the passengers are going to require to have vaccinations. Do you expect that to happen when the U.S. starts cruising from U.S. ports?
It's tough to say. We have already seen that on the river cruise side. River cruise companies, American Queen Steamboat and Victory Cruise Lines became the first in the U.S. to require their passengers and crew to be vaccinated. Obviously, smaller ships there, and a bit of an older demographic typically goes on those. Some of their thinking was on that. But as far as the big ocean liners, Norwegian, Royal, and Carnival, Norwegian and Royal are going to be requiring their crew, but there haven't really been any new updates about whether or not the passengers will have to have the vaccine required on that. Do I think they will? It's really tough to say because I've seen so many mixed reviews from regular travelers and travel advisors too about they're pretty passionate about that they do not want a vaccine mandate, saying that they'll never cruise again, which never say never, because eventually this is all going to get better. A year from now, that probably won't even be a mandate in any capacity. So they'll cruise again. If you love cruising, you're going to cruise again. You might just wait a little bit. Some people are in the wait and see. Some people are full gung ho and going, ready to roll as soon as it can, as soon as we can get back out on the water. I know Royal Caribbean too had over 250,000 people sign up for their test voyages to be a volunteer to go on the test voyages. So there's so much interest still in cruising, and it's just how things might change when the vaccine mandate requirement comes out. If it does come out, it remains to be seen. I don't know that they will, just based upon all the feedback I've heard from travelers and traveler advisors. But then again, maybe the people that just don't want the vaccine are the most vocal about it, and people who are fine with it are just staying quiet to themselves. But I know from the travel advisors that I've talked to, they don't want it. Their key passengers don't want it. So it's dicey there.
It's going to be interesting. Like you said, and you nailed it, the smaller cruise lines that can probably manage it better. A few hundred passengers in an American-based port, just going to American waters, are requiring vaccines. And keep in mind the demographic of those cruises is very high. It's the average age of 70s and up, where like the big ship behind me, Norwegian Encore, the average age is much, much lower. So I think that's part of it too. I do know Princess said, John Chernesky said in his webinar, to them logistically it's not possible. They're definitely going to get the crew vaccinated. So I think you're going to see it's going to be a little bit case by case. Until vaccinations are out there everywhere, then they're going to say, okay, now vaccinations are required, mostly because everyone has one. But I think there's some issues there. But to me, I always said on this show numerous weeks when we saw the future of travel starting to be in the little bit of a distance, is that the future of travel was rapid testing, COVID testing, consistent testing. And already you're seeing that happen with the rule of returning to the U.S. And I think that's for cruises too. And now you're seeing airports have testing. Hotels. I have a client in Sandals, Jamaica right now, not cruising, but U.S. goes, we need testing. And Jamaica goes, no worries, your resort's going to do it. I think cruise ships will have testing in terminals, and that's going to be the key. And I agree that 100% vaccines is not going to be possible. How about
Yeah,
capacity on cruise ships? What are your feelings on what the CD is saying, what the industry partners are saying, the cruise lines are saying? When the first cruises depart, say it's in June, what do you think the capacity restriction is going to be?
I think it'll be some time before they get to full capacity, especially those big ships that can fit, 5,000, 6,000 people on it. So it's going to start out reduced. I think what that number is remains to be seen. Hotels in Mexico and the Caribbean, they started off with 30% capacity last summer. I went to Cancun and the Dominican Republic last summer, and it was actually probably about 15 to 18% full of actual people there. It felt like I had the resort to myself. Cruise line wise, they have to start out as low as 30%. I think they're going to be pretty close to that full 30%. That'll be the new full capacity, if you will.
Sure.
But again, that number isn't finalized yet. It could be 30, it could be 50. Tough to say right now. I think that goes back into what, cruise lines waiting on that guidance from the CDC. And if there is a vaccine mandate, I think that the capacity level might be a little bit higher than if there wasn't one. But again, you and I think, are both in agreement that the vaccine mandate may not happen for the major U.S. lines there. So, it's tough to know right now, but I think it's probably going to be between 30 and 50% on when it comes around.
Very good point. Very good point. Yeah, if they are doing vaccines, American Cruise Line may do 100% capacity if they're allowed, because they're going to require vaccines. Where the bigger cruise lines, if they have to do vaccines, may bring more people in. It's going to be interesting. I do expect a ramp-up period. I know for Disney World, where you're going very soon, I've been going every month since the resort's open, because I own Vacation Club up there. And it was 1/3, it was 25%, then 33%. And I guarantee you they're going to announce soon they're at 50%, which you're going to see. It's a lot busier there. So there is going to be a ramp-up period. It's just going to be, expected. As far as ships are sailing, say reduce capacity, say 1/3, where are they going initially, say from the U.S.? Obviously, the maximum we know is 7 nights, but where are they sailing to?
Right. I think the ports of call that you're going to see first and foremost come up front is the cruise line's private islands. That's where they're going to target first. That's going to be kind of their main draw of, hey, you can come on board our ship. We have so many things to do on this ship. It's so awesome. But, when you do want to get off, we've got this private island for you that has all these cool things, all these amenities, all these new features that they want to tout out there. So I think that's going to be the key right there, is their private islands. That's what will entice people in. Outside of that, I think the Mexico ports are going to be among the most popular, just based on the rules and regulations that they have there. I do know that Royal Caribbean, it's not finalized. They did talk about how the governor in Mexico said that if the Royal Caribbean would do a port leaving out of Cozumel, if the sanctions and the restrictions were still in place for the U.S. for too long. We reached out to Royal Caribbean for comment on that, and they didn't outright confirm it. They said they were just talking to a lot of people about different scenarios and situations, but I thought that was pretty interesting. So it made me think, all right, if the restrictions are lifted and they can cruise out of Miami and Port Canaveral and all that stuff, then I think they're going to go to their private islands, and they're going to go to Mexico, and those are going to be kind of the big draws there too. And obviously, elsewhere in the Caribbean is going to be a huge draw too, because it always is. It just kind of remains to be seen how the different islands will treat that, and how welcoming they'll be initially, and what kind of stuff they'll have in place for shore excursions, what kind of restrictions will be there based upon what the island wants for restrictions there, and what the cruise line wants in terms of restrictions for any shore stuff too. That's why I think private islands will be really key early on, because you can just get off and have the island to yourself, sort of, depending on how many people are actually on board there.
Excellent. You make several great points, which I absolutely agree with. Private islands, why they control the environment. You're not dealing with international governments to a point. I mean, yes, they're in the Bahamas. All of them are in the Bahamas that I know of, except there's Dominican has a couple. But they're dealing with their own way that they can control the port. You're not dealing with, the TSA of that government at the ports. In Mexico, because they never closed. I've known travel agents, like you do too, that have gone every month since COVID hit a year ago. Even when they were shut down, because air travel to Mexico is always available. So those are definitely the two kind of low-hanging fruit. And then I know some islands have just announced their welcome back cruises limited. Some are saying they're opening. So it's going to be a bit of hodgepodge when it comes to the Caribbean. But Now, they have teams who build itineraries. I'm sure they're very clear where they're going to go, but definitely
They won't be going to the Cayman Islands though. I don't know if
that's
you
the
heard.
one.
Yeah,
Thank you.
they are capping no cruises for the rest of 2021, and then when they get out of the pandemic, they're actually capping cruise calls. Period. So I think what they've learned in the last year throughout this pandemic wise is that they can manage, I think with some of their residents and some of the businesses that they do there, that they don't necessarily need the cruising as much as they thought they did or as much as they want to moving forward. Maybe it's just a strategy change, but I did find that interesting that Cayman Islands was already coming out and being vocal about, hey, once we're out of this pandemic thing, we're capping cruise calls and we're focusing our tourism stuff elsewhere. I don't really see other islands in the Caribbean doing that, just because they don't have the luxury that some of the that the Cayman Islands has with some of the residents and that stuff. So should be interesting though.
Okay, Caymans has their own wealth, their own infrastructure because of their banking industry. Yeah. They are very unique when it comes to Caribbean islands, who honestly are kind of rated almost third world when it comes to their economies, and they really rely on tourism. Caymans does a little bit, but the Caymans, when you go there, is expensive. It's nice, but it's expensive for a reason. They have their own infrastructure. And that was disappointing to hear because Caymans is a fantastic cruise stop. Grand Cayman is a fantastic cruise stop. And I'm glad they're going to be an outlier when it comes to that announcement because the other ones are more reliant on the tourism. And ideally, you'll see some other ones. I've heard already St. Lucia and some other ones. No ones pop up. As far as other markets, we understand that it's probably going to be Eastern, Western Caribbean, 7 nights max. That's a CDC rule. A lot of private islands, a lot of, you can't have cruises to nowhere, but cruises to the private islands and back. A lot of days at sea because they can control the environment. What do you see for Alaska? Alaska was big news this past couple weeks because it looks like the 2021 season will not happen. And maybe some cruises out of Seattle, but they need exceptions. And what are your thoughts on the future of Alaska cruising?
Yeah, I think it's rough for this year, for 2021. I think you can kind of call it a wash, I guess, because it doesn't look like it's going to happen. They would need kind of special guidance and special clearances, should I say, on that if they do try to get going. I did see Princess and I believe Holland America are trying to do some land tour stuff through Alaska to just kind of help that economy and help people do trips and stuff there, which I think is really cool through rail travel and stuff like that on Alaska Railroad. So hopefully, people are able to kind of jump at that. I know Alaska changed their COVID protocols, not needing a test to arrive. They still recommend that you do, and I would recommend that as well. But Alaska cruising is going to take a huge hit for this year. Hopefully, it'll bounce back really strong in 2022 and beyond. But yeah, it looks like it's pretty bleak for 2021, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I was very disappointed when Canada made the announcement that they're extending the restriction to their cruise ports. What caused the blockage for my guests listening, you may have heard before, this whole problem is that Canada had this rule, no cruises more than 100 passengers, which is basically all the cruise ships out there, can port in our ports of call until mid-February 2021, and then February hit. We thought we'd hear for 2 months, 3 months. No, another full year. Canada's Canada, and they're doing things that they want to do. And what are you going to do? So right now we're dealing with that. It's something called the Jones Act, which is meant to protect our merchant trade. And I heard rumors that it never actually did, but it's still in place, and it prevents ships from going, foreign flag ships, which is all cruise ships, going from one port to another U.S. port without hitting a foreign port first. And you'd have to go very, very far down to Mexico or over to Hawaii. Or actually, from Alaska, you can go to Vladivostok, Russia, which is a little closer than Hawaii. And that's not possible with the current 7-night restriction, and that wouldn't make for a good Alaska cruise. So with that, most cruise lines have canceled everything involving leaving or departing Vancouver, which is a primary cruise port for south or northbound. Round trip Seattle may work, or even one trip to Anchorage, but you still got to stop in Victoria or Vancouver. And right now, what are your thoughts, Eric, on why they're keeping Seattle? John Chernesky spoke, and a couple of webinars have been on this week, and I still wasn't clear on why they're keeping those cruises. I think they're looking for some kind of exception from Canada maybe, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think just looking for some kind of exception there, trying to get special clearances, trying to do anything that they can to salvage things out of that. I think that they're going to do what they can. And, you've seen with Princess and Holland America doing the land tours. They're just trying to find any way they can to drum up some business and get people to travel and experience Alaska in some capacity.
Exactly. I mean, because it's a great cruise market. I mean, it is unbelievable cruises. All the clients I send up there just love it. And I will say, John Chernesky himself warned us that beware the sticker shock when it comes to these land packages. I'm like, great. But it is something to sell for Alaska. Let's switch gears to a different cruise market. Any word about Hawaii? I know Norwegian has a Hawaiian-based ship. Just they are allowed to sail just Hawaii. Any word from the cruise industry or executives or even other agents you know about Hawaii?
Nothing new there. I actually reached out to Norwegian before this show because you brought that up pre-show, and I wanted to know if there was any sort of update that we could get from Norwegian on this. And they said at this time there's nothing new that they could share. So again, I think that goes back to just waiting for the CDC and the guidance and the all of that stuff. Unfortunately, so nothing new on the Hawaii front there. Hopefully that can get going. It's not a massive cruise market compared to other places out there, but it's still a fun place to get out and cruise and a big draw for Norwegian too. I know people that have experienced it and have loved it. So hopefully that can get going and we can get some more information about that soon on what the future of Hawaii cruising would be like. I do wonder how much Hawaii would, if they would be likely to cap any sort of calls and things like that, like we saw with Cayman, or if they're just going to be full on, yeah, come on back and let's get back to normal kind of thing. So that remains to be seen. Norwegian said that they would reach out as soon as they know, as soon as they have any sort of updates on that. So we're keeping fingers crossed and just waiting to hear.
Hawaii is going to be interesting because there's a trend here in the Keys you may be aware of that may happen in Hawaii with cruising. Key West, ever since COVID hit, has been trying to institute some type of measure to restrict larger cruise ships. And they finally voted one in during the general election in November. Now the state of Florida is trying to override Key West, and there's a big back and forth going on. In Hawaii right now, if you have heard, travel to Kauai is much stricter than inter-island than other islands. So even if you're in Maui and all approved following the current regulations, to get to Kauai is a whole other set of regulations. So, but again, Kauai is not it is a big cruise port for Norwegian. It's going to be interesting. It's probably not going to be coming back for, I think, until the fall, but we shall see. How about Europe? Obviously, we just had some news this week with Princess canceling Europe. CDC doesn't have reach there. CDC only controls cruises starting or ending or touching a U.S. port. There's a number of tons of cruises that just start and end in Europe. So they're outside of CDC regulations, but there's still some issues there.
Right. Yeah. They got to handle with European governments and everything over there. I think that once restrictions are lifted for all of Europe travel, I think that will kind of come back a little bit more than it already has. We've seen MSC Cruises was able to successfully launch, and they did cancel for a bit, but they had Mediterranean cruises going over there, and they kind of set forth the first launch on that, and in terms of new protocols in place and seeing how things were going with that. They ended up kicking people off too, which was crazy. People didn't follow the rules and they booted them, and we wrote a story about that because that's going to happen in the future if you don't follow the rules, and the cruise lines are pretty strict about they will kick you off. So I think Europe will be good, and then obviously you got really popular in Europe is river cruising, and Amur Waterways is a big one there. So yeah, I think it's just kind of wait and see mode until more restrictions can get lifted, but I think that will come back pretty strong too. I know a lot of travel advisors I've talked to have said that they have clients that are very big on Europe river cruising, and they really want to get out and experience some of those bigger ports and draws and the newer ships out there too.
Exactly. And river cruising could be the first to come back because the lower capacity is less of a threat to local governments and state country governments. And also because they could meet 100% vaccine because of the lower numbers, 200 people versus, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. Now, Eric, you said something that leads me into my last question for you. Passengers were kicked off cruises, but there were also passengers that were not allowed to come back on European cruises because they didn't stay along with the sanctioned shore excursions from the cruise line. So let's talk about that. Okay, we're cruising in June or July. We're on a ship. What does it look like when you get off the ship?
Yeah, what we're going to see there's not a whole lot of new information right now on what the cruise lines are setting forth on that, but I think you can kind of look to how MSC handled things, how it looked there, and it's likely that a guide or someone specifically that works with the cruise line is going to follow you the whole time and make sure that you aren't breaking any sort of protocols. Some of this could change if there are vaccine mandates, obviously, so that goes back and forth with how they're going to handle things with that if there's not, and it's all about testing before you board and when you leave and everything. Then I do think that with shore excursions, you might have when you're at the popular ports, you might have to have people follow you. And again, that goes back to what we were saying earlier in the show with the private islands, and I think that'll be key, because then you can just get off and go enjoy the beach or get some Corona and limes and you just relax at the bars there or whatever, and not have to worry about things on the private island side of things. But when you're actually at the ports, it might be a little bit different, but it also might depend too on the actual port that wherever you land at. They may have their own set of rules in place that's different from another island or another country too. So a lot to unfold there once we can learn more about what restrictions are going to be put in place once these cruises do finally launch.
Great points, as always. I mean, I believe it's going to be like Cuba for a lot of places. I did the Fathom, remember Fathom, the short-lived cruise line, in their Cuba cruise in May of 2016. And they really said, you have to do these sponsored excursions, you have to do this because the Cuban government requires it. Well, it turns out a few people went on their own. They just had to keep track of what they did. I think it's going to be like, at first, pretty strict, but depending on the location. And then as vaccines get out there, as restrictions loosen up, the cruise lines will not be as concerned where you go on that island. But it's going to be interesting. And honestly, I have some third-party shore excursion providers I used to really use. One of them's out of business now, Short Trips, I'm sure you heard about. Another one, I'm afraid to recommend them right now because I believe you're going to have to use the Royal Caribbean the cruise line providers, Royal Caribbean, for example. So I'm kind of like up in the air right now of what is going to happen with shore excursions. It will all go back to normal eventually, but it's going to be pretty interesting.
Right. But yeah, those early first few cruises is going to be the whole kind of test and learn and experiment kind of thing. So I think it will be a lot of the cruise lines will require that you only do shore excursions through them, but that means they're also going to get more money that way. So when they want more money now because they have been cruising for a while. So we're going to see that. So the whole onboard experience and offboard is going to be really interesting and totally different at first, but slowly but surely we'll get back to being normal, or I guess in a new normal now too, because cruise lines are going to be having more emphasis on health and safety and making sure that people don't get sick in any capacity, because they don't want that negative press. You can't take it anymore. They won't be able to withstand it. So
eventually, eventually there'll be, and I've witnessed it at Disney World month to month. At first it was like just so amazingly strict. And now I'm riding Flight of Passage with as you're going to experience soon, with people right next to me because of the dynamics of the ride. They found plexiglass everywhere. They will find ways, which makes a good point. And I got a great question in the chat here from Skip. And Skip's a big follower on my show and also one of my agents. So Skip Shear had a great question. He asked, let me pull up the question here. It says, Skip asked, so what are the ships going to look like based on what the professional is saying? Are masks going to be required? Are there going to be buffets? Are there going to be shows? What about casinos?
Yeah, so I think masks will be required on board. Again, I've seen a lot of people say, well, if you have a vaccine mandate, then you shouldn't have a mask mandate too. So that's really up to the cruise line and what they put forward. So again, you and I agree. Don't think there will be a vaccine mandate. So I do think masks will be mandatory on board throughout, except obviously in your cabin and when you're seated and eating and focused there. There won't be any buffets. The buffet will be kind of what it'll mirror what we've seen at all-inclusive resorts. Instead of serving yourself, getting all that food, someone will serve you in that. And they may be limited on how much they're open to in the buffets. That I saw that a lot at the all-inclusive resorts too. They, certain buffets are only open for, certain times of the day, and they weren't 24 hours on that. So I think we'll see that too. Shows wise, it'll probably be limited and socially distanced seating and all that stuff. May not be able to sit that far up close so that the performers don't have to wear masks and things like that. But there'll still be shows, there'll still be entertaining. They want to provide those services for their guests because that's what they're there to experience. Casino wise, I think they'll try to mirror what has gone on in Vegas. Plexiglass up. You're probably still gonna have to wear the mask the entire time that you're in the casino and playing your roulette or rolling the dice on craps and hopefully winning yourself some money. And you can look past all of the restrictions in place and wearing a mask and having plexi and hand sanitizer all smell all around you instead of cigarette smell maybe. But if, as long as you win some money, then you'd be pretty good, right? You've got to focus on the positives here,
Oh, exactly. I mean, the thing is that cruising is still going to be fun. It's just going to be a little different.
Right.
And I have an example where I think some of this change is for the better. And I'll go back to Disney because it's the only thing really I've seen the last year for travel. And I've been to Texas a couple of times for some other business, but there's something at Disney called Beer Garden. It's like Oktoberfest in the Epcot German Pavilion. They went from buffet to family style. That is a better experience now. I mean, the food comes to you, less waste on their part, although Disney does a phenomenal job recycling and waste. And to me, I finally did it in November, Thanksgiving weekend, and it was better. I said, you know what? I'm a big fan of family style now. And I could see the cruise lines doing something similar, and they're probably going to see a big improvement in their food budget if they do. So we shall see. Eric, it's been great having you on today. Eric's got to go to pack for his big Disney trip coming up. Before you go, please tell us again how do people find you. He's the executive editor of TravelPulse and the host of TravelPulse podcast, of which I follow religiously every week. But tell people how they find out more about TravelPulse and you.
Yeah, TravelPulse.com is the website. Check us out. Bookmark us, please. And TravelPulse podcast, you can find anywhere you listen to podcasts. Look us up, just search TravelPulse, and we'll come up. We're right there. That's me. And you can follow me on the social media at Eric Bowman _ is my handle there. And that's it, man. Thank you for having me, man. I had a lot of fun. And, fingers crossed, we'll get rolling on this cruising and be able to party on a cruise ship together sometime,
Oh, yes, please. We'll have to get one of those free sailings when they first launch. We'll see where that goes. But Eric, it was great to have you on. I got more questions I'll handle in the chat. I know you have to go, and appreciate it. I look forward to being on your podcast soon, and I'll announce that to everyone in our audience.
Yeah, we'll work out a date offline on this, and we'll make it happen. So thank you so much, man. I really appreciate this. This was fun.
Thanks, Eric. Have a good night. Well, that was great. Eric Bowman, editor of TravelPulse and TravelPulse podcast. Going to head to questions in the chat real quick. Let me just rearrange my set real quick and get back to what I'm doing. All right, great questions. Appreciate you guys. Great interview. Eric is the man. So let me get the chat box back up, and chat box is working today. So first off, we have, by the way, big hands out to Eric Bowman. I'll be in his podcast March 30th, and I'll be sharing that to my social media, so check that out. He has a great podcast, more for travel industry professionals, but I look forward to being on that as a VIP guest. When can we be cruising again? We did cover that in the show, so appreciate the question, Bonnie Barnes. And, right now looking at June-ish, and that's the early part, and as we talked about, short cruises. Skip Shear, this is a very appropriate Skip Shear question. Will there be adult beverage packages on board when cruises resume? I believe so, yes. There have been no signs on our end as travel agents that those are not being for sale, and I have already booked clients. The Free at Sea is a marquee of Norwegian Cruise Line. They're not going to take that away, so that is a guaranteed yes. There's no reason they take that away, so that's awesome. And then, Sherry Bars Langton says, Jamaica, man, Jamaica, man. I hear you. And then my friend from JG, Jim Gaffney, who was on my guest last weekend. And he actually mentioned this to me, not on the show, but afterwards when we talked about cruising, when he figured out more what I actually do. I have friends from high school who still have no idea what I do, which is pretty funny. And he said, man, what about Cuba? I've been to Cuba. Cuba was amazing in 2016 when the Obama administration, I hate to say it, but it's based on our current administrations. And then the next administration said, no more cruising to Cuba. It's a political thing. And then the current administration has said they're more open to that, but they have yet to say anything. And that may remain that way. So who knows? It's all about politicking. We need the OFAC, the Office of Foreign Asset Control, to say you're okay to go to Cuba because that's what is involved there. Don't ask me why. Same reason that CDC controls cruise line. So great question, JG, my friend Jim Gaffney, and great guest last week, and appreciate that question. Yeah, thank you, Sherry. Great show. Appreciate that. Sherry, always thank you for being here, and I appreciate that. This is the tough one. I can't tell you how much my business is cruising. I can't tell you how many of cruises I've scheduled the last few weeks alone from 2021 to 2022. And the cruise lines finally realize, forget giving them credits, forget giving them a discount, just move their sailing to next year. And honestly, the cruise line that's given me the most headaches, Royal Caribbean, has been the easiest to move if you stayed booked. And I got a whole story behind that for friends of mine that just rebooked. Literally, I have friends that just rebooked. We just called up, said, hey, moving to 2022, same reservation number, same pricing, just move the dates. And then behind the scenes, without me involved. Then Princess, freaking nightmare. Love the cruise line, freaking nightmare to reschedule. So that's where we're at. But the idea is that cruising is going to happen. The bigger cruises you want to rebook to 2022 are the Alaskas, the Hawaiis, the Europes, what we talked about and with Eric there. But Caribbean, and you're going to see these short cruises, private islands that we talked about in control. I don't want to repeat too much from the interview. Eric is amazing. That's why I had him on the show. Oh, great question. Great question. And it came from our viewers. Thank you, Bruce. And Bonnie put it in the box for us. Hey, Mom's on. Hey, Mom. So how do I sail free on a free cruise when announced? Great question, because I have no idea. Considering Royal Caribbean was the only time. So let's back up. What caused this that you have to have a free cruise? I go on free cruises all the time. I earn that right as a travel agent because I give literally 6 figures in bookings to some cruise lines. I have $1 million travel agency, not to brag, but I do a lot of revenue in cruising. I mean, I had one ship alone, 6 figures in 1 year, Norwegian Sky, with different groups. I get invited to free cruises, but it's a media event. CDC, the Center for Disease Control, has said that to get back to cruising, they must have some, it's a name for it, workout cruises. Help me out, producer. There's a name for this. But anyways, like a shakeout cruise. It means that you can't charge for it. And that led Royal Caribbean create a poll. Who would want to go on a cruise? That was all marketing, folks. That was all marketing just to create a buzz to show their investors saying, hey, keep us alive, and to show the CDC like people want a cruise. So take that for what it's worth. If they do free cruises, it will be a lottery system, because 200,000 people responded. 200,000 people responded to that survey plus. So great question. But don't bank on that. Bank on booking the cruise you want to go on. And right now we believe I actually, in my files right over here, I have a cruise in May that is still scheduled. I believe that will be canceled because all the cruises have canceled. I think in June we have a chance for some cruises. Now, a question I had to Eric beforehand that we scrapped because we know the answer was, well, gee, if I'm booked and they're going at a third capacity, how's that going to go? And we believe they've been booking at lower capacity for a year out, so they're already planned for that. So if you're booked on a cruise for June or July, you're going to sail, or they're going to give you some serious benefits to reschedule, just like an airline does when you rebook. So keep that in mind. Excellent question. Great guest. This is a tough subject. Every time I do an update, it changes every day. I was literally on the trades this morning, publications I get that only I see for travel agents, and trying to see what's happening in the cruise lines. And like we said, some smaller lines that can handle it are already requiring 100% vaccinations. John Chernesky, as I said from Princess, said there's no way. They can never do that. It's just not possible based on 3,000-4,000 people on a cruise ship. It's going to be interesting. But you will see rapid testing in a terminal. You will see the fact that you're sent over to a corner and rapid tested if you don't have your credentials in place. But some proof of COVID test will be involved in all your travel requirements going forward for a very long time, even with vaccinations in place, till we get an idea, until we wipe out this whole thing and say, hey, it's just like the cold or the measles. Remember the measles? So just keep that in mind. So all great questions. Sherry, that's awesome, Sherry. You're the best. All right. I had a great question. I didn't see it in the chat, but it came from before the cruise. This is a more difficult question, and this is going to end the show with. They've planned for this, so I'll preface that up front. But what if there's a COVID outbreak when you're on board? What's going to happen? And we all know back to February last year, a year ago, that's why the cruise lines are getting treated so unfairly now, because it was mishandled by countries, by Japan, by California, other cruise lines involved. They're prepared for this. That's what the CDC has done. And a great question I asked to Eric was, why are they regulating cruises? It's not that they are. The cruises are voluntarily looking to the CDC, so they have no liability in this. And he explained, I finally got it. So now I get it. The CDC is not a regulatory body, but the cruise lines are going on science, unlike the airlines that are just going by what they want to do and whatever the FAA says. Now, no one says, oh, there's been no COVID outbreaks on airlines. I absolutely disagree. They're spreading COVID throughout the country, but we still have to get around. So the cruises are relying on the science of the CDC. So they are well prepared for any outbreak. They literally have to have up a certain medical staff. They have to have the ability to test every person on board. And that's why it's been like, there's been a fight going on about how much people we need to have on board versus how much capacity we can have for this. And that's been the back and forth like this. They're begging the CDC for more lean scene requirements. So tough question, tough answer, but the idea is that they're prepared. Norovirus outbreaks, that's the sickness in the stomach. Oh my God, it happens on cruises all the time. Actually, no, it doesn't. It happens in hotels every day. You never hear about it because they don't have to report it. But cruise lines do, because they're international waters and they're regulated by the Coast Guard, not the CDC, and they have to report it. So once in 100, it happens on a cruise ship, you hear about it. It happens every single major group in a hotel. It's just a minor thing you don't hear about. Don't worry about it. I'm not scaring you into something you don't know about. So keep that in mind. So they're well prepared if something's going to happen. They didn't have a year off from cruising and didn't do anything. And what's nice about the cruise lines is all the ones I talked to, most of them have said they can keep this going without sailing for a while longer because they're profitable companies, because they have hard assets, they're cruise ships. Unlike other transportation areas, buses and trains and airlines that are begging for federal government intervention to keep them alive. Cruise lines are not flagged here. They employ a lot of people here and pay a ton of taxes on top of that for people employed here. They have not asked for one dime from the federal government here in the U.S. and are not getting any. So do not worry about that argument. They are self-sufficient. They will still be here. Smaller lines I can't guarantee, but the medium to big lines are fine. Great question. Great show, guys. I appreciate everyone being on board. It's been awesome. Some late people that popped on. Bruce C., thanks for being here, Bruce. Sorry, Bruce, can't pronounce your last name. Margie Morales, hey, what's going on? Dennis Ward, hey, Dennis, what's happening? Dennis, man, appreciate your work on all the Keys group sites you're out there. For our state's attorney, he's amazing how active he's on social media. I really appreciate him. Awesome questions today. So that's where we are at with cruising. Eric Bowman, amazing guest. Look out for my appearance on his show on March 30th. It's a podcast, so it's pre-recorded. That's when I appear in his show. So I will forward you the email that you can listen to my appearance. And I look forward to that. Don't know the topic yet, but it'll be something I know a lot about. Guarantee that. All right. As always, so please watch the recording if you join the show late on our Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching this. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. That really helps us out, and like every channel. The Enjoy the Journey playlist on the channel is all my shows going back to a year ago, last late March, and pick a topic and sit back and enjoy. And also next week, and also keep commenting on the posts you see, because I go back and I'll answer those comments. And please put questions in the chat. Next week's show, we're back. My once-a-month visit continues in a different resort, Walt Disney World, Saratoga Springs Resort, the biggest campus resort they have, over 880 units, actually up to 1,000 depending how they divide it. It is awesome. Wait to see the show we have prepared for you guys. We're staying in a studio recently refurbished. I'm going to show you the new Saratoga Springs preferred section. We can see Disney Springs and walk to it from where we are. Going to be a great show. It's also Flower and Garden Festival, and we may work that into the show on Sunday next week at 5 o'clock right here on Facebook Live and YouTube. Been a great show, guys, about cruising. As always, we appreciate the questions. Keep them going in the chat and rewind this show when you get it. And we look forward to seeing you next week from Saratoga Springs Resort. Take care, guys.